Welcome back to the Barrel Talk Podcast. We are back with another episode, episode 161. Joining Nick Wynn on the call, continuing our series of breaking down every NFL team going into this offseason and what they need to do to get better going into next year. Nick is going to be talking about the San Francisco 49ers in this episode, a team that has a lot of question marks going in with an older roster that can still really compete for a Super Bowl. So,
yeah.
Coming off an interesting year.
Coming off a very interesting year. I think it's fair when I say I gave them a F grade. Definitely missed the playoffs going into the year as Super Bowl favorites. So, I gave them an F. Looking at their stats a little bit, they were 14th in points per game, 4th at yards per game. They're pretty good at in both sides of the offense, 3rd in yards and pass yards per game and top 10 in rush yards per game. It was just in situations, like in big situations, like turnover margin, they're minus 10 on the season, 27th. So, they turn the ball over at an enormous rate. They gave up opponent third down conversions at, a bottom 10 rating. So, those things, the intricate things in the game when you're coming down to, third downs, late in the game stuff, they just weren't great. They lost 9 games in which they led at some point, which was the most in the league.
I think they lost 2 to in the last 5 minutes to the Rams and the Cardinals at one point in the season.
It was rough. That's tied with the Jags, Raiders, Jets, and Titans, who are 4 of the worst teams in the league. So that's not good. Other things that went wrong, they did play the hardest schedule in the league based on end of season win percentage. They did also have to play Kansas City and Buffalo coming off of both their byes. So, they didn't get help at all from the schedule makers.
No.
Had the second most cap space on the IR/PUP list. Obviously, we knew the whole season, big names out every single week. Christian McCaffrey, you lose Brandon Ayuk. Trent Williams was missing games here and there. I believe Greenlaw was out most of the year. Travarius Ward was hurt at some points. Everybody's getting hurt. So you have a super hard schedule. Your guys are constantly getting hurt. You're not good at the details of the game and the biggest points. And last, Brock Purdy. He only had 20 touchdowns at 12 interceptions, 67.9 QBR, and a 96.1 rating. So they needed Brock to be more Superman, and he just couldn't do it in a lot of spots, especially, again, like I said, in the big spots. You're giving, you're losing 9 games in which you led. So they're giving up games, turning the ball over. Just things just weren't going right for this team. And, we came into the season thinking that they were the NFC favorites. So it's just a really tough look in a hard division. But I think they still could be fine next year, and I'm going to kind of go over why. They do have the 11th pick in the draft. Me personally, I'm going with O-line. Now, I don't watch a lot of college ball, so I don't know a lot of names. But mocks have some guy named Josh Simmons or Armand Membao. So, I'm going O-line first pick probably. Obviously, you can look at best player available. If you really need, if someone falls from defense, and they do need defensive players as well. But I would try to get O-line because we saw Brock Purdy actually under a lot of pressure this year, which he did actually show that he was quite mobile in those situations. He was able to get out. He was really good on the run. Most of the big plays or highlights you'd see from his season he was on the run. But I would just try to shore up that O-line. I then later in the second round, third round, I'd go with D-line and secondary. Because, you do have a few guys that are getting older and a few guys that are expiring contracts. The biggest contract that they do have expiring is Travarius Ward, who's a top 5 corner or safety. He's gonna be necessary. He's 29 years old. Market has him at around $15 million per year, so I'm signing him to a 3-4 year deal, 45-60 mil.
I also have heard, because just me being a Vikings fan through just Vikings lore, about we need a corner. He could be somebody on the market. He also could be just wanting to get a fresh start because he did have a death in the family this past year in San Fran, and I feel like he also came out about going through a lot there. To where
Right.
I also have seen like reports of him possibly just like not wanting to
Not
be in
wanting
San
to just
Francisco.
resign there.
Yeah. So I've also
Fair.
heard that, but he could resign as well. I
Gotcha.
that's just stuff I've heard.
Okay. Well, I'm at least offering it to him, and my university comes back, but we'll see. I guess. Another one, Drake Greenlaw. He was hurt last year, like the whole year. I'm signing him back. Market says around $7 million. Like, I'd try to get him back on like a year, 2 year. He's 27 years old. Like, he's still a dog. Last time we saw him, so like I'm at least trying to get like a 2 year, maybe like incentive based stuff. Another big one is Devondre Campbell. I'm letting his ass go. I'm not going to go over the rest of them. They didn't have too many big like money free agents. Actually, a lot of their guys are still signed for another year or two. In free agency, I'd grab another O lineman at like a cheap price. Like, they do have $50 million in cap space, but we do know that Brock Purdy's gonna need it next year. Like, we are gonna, in my universe, we're signing Charvarius Ward for like 15 mil. So like, we have about 30 mil in cap space. So I'm signing like someone like Ronnie Stanley or like Jedrick Wills, probably like $3-4 million. Jedrick Wills had an okay year in Cleveland. And then I'm looking at Justin Simmons from Atlanta would be a huge pickup at safety to kind of shore that up, especially if Charvarius Ward gets out. He's 31 years old, probably be like $6 million. So like, I'm picking him up.
And they traded for him, right?
Yes.
So he really doesn't have any.
He does not have
probably.
any ties.
Yeah,
he got no ties there, and they didn't have a good year. And I think he's also like better than how he played last year. Obviously, Justin Simmons has been a dog in the past.
Especially because Atlanta's defense was also just bad in general last year.
For sure. So yeah, I'm snagging him at like, if I can snag $6 million, like I feel like that's cheap as fuck. So, just a few moves to like stay above the cap, not lose too many pieces, and give Brock Purdy one more year to really work with this roster. They're not in as bad of a shape as I thought money wise. So again, like I just think you run it back again. Brock Purdy, I'm not paying him in this universe. I'm not paying him before the season starts. I'm not giving him that contract. I'm going to make him go into this year and really prove it because, like, I'm putting stock into last year that he couldn't. But there's just a lot of circumstances. They had the hardest schedule in the league. Like, they did lead in a bunch of these games. You lose your best back. You lose your best, I'd say your best receiver. You like a bunch of these defensive guys were missing. So like, I'm not putting it on him. So it's like, I'm not sitting here and I'm like, no, he's not the starter. Like, I'm definitely not paying him the money. But like this year, I'm not going to pay him before the season starts. I'm going to give him this year to work with the same roster and try to do it. They did have Jawan Jennings have a breakout year. So like, you could potentially look to trade away Debo with how things were looking at the back half of the year. I wouldn't be against that necessarily because he also carries quite the price tag. But I'm not looking to do that right now, especially because like I said, they're not in as big of a money problem as I thought.
The Debo thing's super interesting because he's just somebody, if you're like looking from the Niners perspective, Debo can be hit or miss at this point for a lot of games. And you gotta think you're probably going through a stretch of this year where he's just out for 4 weeks.
Yes. Yeah.
So, especially with his specific play style and how he is used with the Niners, he's worth keeping around because he is a big play threat at any point in the game. But I also just think there was a lot of narratives on, you can put any running back behind the Niners O-line and they'll be fine. But I think you really saw once CMC wasn't out there, like their receiving game just wasn't the same because of him being out. This is like, you gotta think like the gap between CMC and Jordan Mason, even though Jordan Mason was hooping throughout stretches of the year,
he was killing it.
That pass game did hurt because of him. And then like you said, they're not in really a bad spot money wise. Like, you still gonna have, in my opinion, like the most consistent tight end in the league.
Yeah, like you
George Kittle.
You got CMC locked up.
So like, if you can get CMC back, like you have Pearsall as well.
Pearsall,
like,
I didn't even mention him.
Like, and he was a rookie last year, and he dealt with some things going into the year. So now you get a full offseason ramp up.
He has 4 like good receivers.
Yeah. I think they're going to be just fine. You're telling me the Niners are going to get a lot easier of a schedule going into this next year. Obviously, it's Brock Purdy on a prove-it year for sure, because even if you're the Niners and Purdy doesn't work out, you're kind of in a position to where like you're kind of like on the edge of your roster anyways with how the ages are working out and how old your roster is, to where it's just like if you don't see exactly what you're looking for out of Purdy this year, it could be time to pivot, which I think is going to be a huge year to kind of decide that. But if they're healthy, I still think they have a top 5-6 roster in the league. So like you're just kind of, and especially in that division, to where you're like, the Rams are talking about not having Stafford next year. Like the Cardinals are, every year is supposed to be the Cardinals a year.
Right.
The Seahawks are like whatever. Like the Seahawks can start the year 7-0, and then people still won't take them seriously. So like, if the Niners come out and just dominate that division, barring on whatever the Rams decide to be next year, and even the Rams usually start out slow to start the year. So like, the Rams were very fortunate the Niners were not a team this year to compete for that division, because that's the only reason why they got back in the mix. But they're in kind of like a weaker division, to where a lot of question marks in that division. If they can just even have half a solid year, they're going to be winning that division.
I think so too. Like they'll easily be the division favorite, as they should.
Yeah, and then I've also just heard just a lot of, obviously when you have a season go like this, there's just a lot of, oh, is Kyle Shanahan the guy? Listen, we see how quick coach turnover goes in the league. You don't just say, you know what, we're going to get rid of a guy who's taken us to multiple Super Bowls and multiple championship games just because we just had a really down year, which half of it wasn't even his fault. So looking at this, I think they're going to be fine. I think they're prime, because we just got done talking about Jacksonville as well. I think they're prime for just a really bad down year, which could be a blessing. Get a better draft pick this year. Hopefully hit on that. Like they still, like you said, they have their guys wrapped up. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Niners were just back to usual business next year.
Either at all. Yeah, I expect it, honestly. I expect it. Yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, I mean, the Niners are kind of, there's a lot of teams that we're going to go through over this offseason period, to where it's just like, we can talk about free agent acquisitions and everything else like that, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to, if this team's healthy, they're going to compete in the NFC. Like, it's just what it comes down to. But we can wrap it up there, talking about the San Francisco 49ers and their offseason, what they need to do going into next year. Thank you guys for tuning into the Barrel Talk Podcast. Hope you tune in to future episodes.